Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive made just for you Vintage Car Chronicles listeners out there on Spotify.
Awesome to be here.
We're going to be taking a deep dive into all the intel we have on a real modern classic.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Toyota GT86 and the Subaru BRZ twins.
Two of my favorites.
These cars are so fascinating.
I really are.
It's a partnership between two companies that are known for very different things, and they were deliberately designed to be fun to drive.
Yeah.
Instead of just chasing those big numbers, horsepower and all that.
Right. It's about the feel. It's not about the numbers on a sheet of paper. It's about how it feels.
Exactly. Who would have thought that Toyota,
Yeah, right?
the king of reliable but kind of boring cars, would be behind something like this?
Yeah, I know. It was a real surprise to everybody, I think. A lot of people were scratching their heads when that came out.
We've got design notes, articles, even some old marketing stuff.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing how much thought went into actually making these cars a reality.
Yeah, it all started with a little bit of a gamble. Can you imagine pitching a lightweight rear-wheel drive sports car to Toyota back then?
Right.
Especially with their reputation at the time. They were known for making, like you said, reliable, practical cars, but not really exciting sports cars.
Yeah, definitely not known for raw driver-focused machines. But there were some passionate folks within Toyota who had a different vision. That's where Tetsuya Tada comes in.
Yeah.
He was the chief engineer, and he was all about this project.
Yeah, Tada. I mean, he was all about bringing back the joy of driving. You know, he wanted to create a car that put a smile on your face, that made you feel alive. It wasn't about, like I said before, 0 to 60 times or, how many horsepower it has.
Right.
It was about pure driving enjoyment. And that's where Subaru enters the picture.
Okay, so we've got Toyota wanting to bring back the spirit of their iconic AE86 Corolla, which is famous for being fun and balanced and rear-wheel drive. And we have Subaru.
Right.
The boxer engine masters. But Subaru and rear-wheel drive.
Yeah.
That doesn't really compute, does it?
It's not really their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, initially Subaru was really hesitant. They're known for their all-wheel drive system. They've built their reputation on that.
Sure.
And to move away from that was a big step for them.
They had a prototype, right?
They did.
Oh, I love prototype stories.
Right.
What was so special about this one?
Tada and his team really wanted to prove to Subaru what they were trying to accomplish. So they built this prototype that embodied that vision. It was lightweight, it was agile, it was all about the driver, it was raw, it was engaging, it was pure. And when Subaru engineers finally got behind the wheel and drove this thing, they were blown away.
Oh, I bet.
They finally understood what Tada was talking about.
So this prototype was a turning point.
Huge turning point. It convinced Subaru to come on board and join the project.
So how did they end up working together? What were the roles?
Well, they called this joint effort Team 86. Oh, cool.
It was a true collaboration. Subaru brought their expertise with the boxer engines.
Yeah.
And Toyota, well, they handled a lot of the platform development, the styling, and overall vehicle engineering.
So they really took the best of both worlds and put it together in this one package.
You got it.
That's so cool. And this Team 86 philosophy, that really became the heart and soul of these cars. It wasn't about being the fastest.
Nope.
It was about being the most fun.
It really was. And there's this great story about how Tada would test the car. He'd send a test driver out, have him drive the car.
Yeah.
And when he got back, he would only ask one question.
What was it?
Did you enjoy it?
Really? He wouldn't ask about lap times or anything like that?
Nope. He didn't care about any of that.
Yeah.
He wanted to know if the driver felt that connection, that joy.
Wow.
That really tells you everything you need to know about the priorities.
It does. They weren't chasing numbers, they were chasing feeling.
Exactly.
And they made some pretty unconventional design choices. Yes, they did, to get that driver engagement.
Some people thought they were crazy, but...
Yeah, like what were they thinking with those narrow tires?
I know, right? It's almost like they borrowed them from a Prius.
A Prius, what was the point of that?
It was all about control.
Yeah.
See, with narrow tires, the car reaches its limits at lower speeds.
Okay.
So it's easier to slide, it's easier to control, even for less experienced drivers.
So they deliberately limited the grip to make it more fun.
Exactly. They wanted a car that was approachable and fun for everyone.
That's such a cool approach. And it wasn't just the tires. The whole design was inspired by classic Toyota sports cars.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You can definitely see the influence of the AE86, that iconic Corolla we talked about.
Yeah.
But you also see hints of the legendary 2000 GT, that beautiful coupe.
Yeah.
And even the lesser-known Sports 800.
Okay, so front engine, rear-wheel drive.
Yes.
Lightweight construction. all these things focused on making the car fun to drive. Exactly. It was all about rediscovering that pure, unadulterated joy of driving.
Now let's talk about the engine.
All right, the heart of the beast.
It's got that Subaru Boxer engine, right?
It does.
But it's not just any Boxer engine, is it?
No, it's not. It's a naturally aspirated 2.0-liter flat-four classic Subaru. But they added a little Toyota magic to it. They paired it with Toyota's D4S injection system.
Oh, wow. What does that do?
It's a pretty cool system. It uses both direct and port injection.
Okay.
So you get the best of both worlds. You get better performance and better efficiency.
I see. So it's not just about horsepower. It's about how that power is delivered.
Right. They wanted an engine that was responsive, that felt lively, and that sounded great too.
I bet. And they went to a lot of trouble to get the weight distribution right.
Oh yeah, weight distribution is key in a sports car.
Yeah.
Especially one that's focused on handling.
Absolutely. So how'd they pull that off?
Well, the front engine, rear-wheel drive layout is a good start. You know, it naturally balances the car out. But they didn't stop there. They were obsessed with shedding weight. They used an aluminum hood, a thin steel roof, and they even ditched some of the electronic driver aids. You know, they wanted to keep it pure.
It's like they were channeling the spirit of those classic lightweight sports cars where every ounce mattered.
Exactly. They wanted a car that felt nimble, agile, and alive in your hands.
So we have this car that's light, well-balanced.
Yes.
It's got this unique responsive engine.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is designed to be driver-focused. Sounds like the perfect recipe for success. But did it actually live up to the hype?
Well, that's what we're going to dive into next.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear more.
Stay tuned. It's a fascinating story.
I bet it is.
It really is.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the Toyota GT86 and the Subaru BRZ.
Oh, they absolutely delivered. The GT86 and the BRZ got rave reviews for their handling. Their responsiveness. Just that overall feeling of being connected to the road.
You really felt like you were in the car.
Yes, exactly. You weren't just along for the ride, you were a part of it.
I remember reading reviews where people were saying that these cars begged to be driven hard.
They did. They wanted you to push them, to have fun, to explore their limits.
And it's not like they were super expensive, right?
No, not at all. That was one of the best things about them. They were accessible.
So it wasn't just for like the wealthy enthusiasts. Right. Anybody could get in and have that experience.
Exactly. Tada really wanted to make a sports car that everyone could enjoy.
Okay, so we've talked about how they were on the road.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned they proved themselves on the track.
Yes, they did.
So what made them so well suited for motorsports? Was it just that lightweight chassis?
That was definitely a big part of it. I mean, that lightweight and balanced platform made them super adaptable for tuning and modifications.
So you could really make them your own.
Yeah, you could really dial them in for whatever type of racing you wanted to do.
Cool.
And their rear-wheel drive layout, that made them perfect for drifting, which has become huge in motorsports.
Drifting?
Drifting, yeah. It's all about controlled slides and looking super cool while you're doing it.
There's something so satisfying about seeing a car go sideways.
I know. It's like an art form.
It is. Did the GT86 and BRZ become popular in the drifting scene?
Oh, huge. I mean, they became staples in competitions all over the world.
Really?
Yeah. Drivers loved them because they were so predictable and responsive.
So it's like a perfect platform to learn those drifting skills.
Exactly. They gave you the confidence to push the limits and really get creative with your driving.
So we've got pro drifting.
Yeah.
But then you also mentioned grassroots motorsports, too.
Right. The 86 Racing and the BRZ RA Racing series.
Oh, yeah. What were those all about?
So those were one-make race series, which means everyone is driving the same car.
Makes sense.
And these series were created specifically for the GT86 and the BRZ.
I bet they were popular.
They were huge, and they weren't just about racing.
No.
They created this amazing community of owners and enthusiasts. It was a place where people could come together, share their passion for these cars.
I love that.
Learn from each other, and just have a blast.
It's so cool that these cars had this broad appeal.
It is.
You know, from casual enthusiasts to hardcore racers.
It's pretty remarkable, actually.
I know they had a bunch of different special editions and variants over the years. What were some of the ones that stood out?
Oh, man. There were so many cool ones. In Japan, the Toyota 86 came in a ton of different trim levels.
Like what?
You had everything from the bare bones RC model, which was perfect for people who wanted to modify their cars, all the way up to the fully loaded GT Limited model.
So they really catered to all tastes and budgets.
Absolutely.
What about Subaru? Did they do anything interesting with the BRZ?
Yeah, Subaru kept ththings a little simpler. They had the base R trim and then the more upscale S trim.
Uh-huh.
But they also had some limited edition models.
Ooh, like what?
The BRZ TS, for example, that was tuned by Subaru Technica International.
The STI?
Huh.
Those guys know how to make a car go fast.
Oh, yeah.
What was special about the TS?
It had upgraded suspension, bigger brakes, and a bunch of aerodynamic improvements. They were basically track-focused BRZs.
So they were taking it to the next level.
Exactly. They were for the hardcore enthusiasts.
I love how they kept things fresh with all these different versions and options.
Yeah, they were always coming up with something new.
But at the heart of it all, it was still about that driver engagement, that pure driving pleasure.
They never lost sight of that original vision.
And speaking of evolution, we can't forget about the second generation of the GT86 and BRZ.
Right, a whole new chapter.
They arrived in 2021.
Yeah.
You mentioned they addressed some of the criticisms from the first generation.
They did.
Was it a total redesign?
Not a total redesign, more like a refinement.
Yeah.
They took everything that was great about the first generation and they made it even better. They listened to the feedback and they made some smart changes.
Okay, now you've got to tell me more.
Yeah.
What did they change? Did they finally give it more power?
They did. That was the biggest change. They bumped it up to a 2.4-liter engine.
All right, so it's still naturally aspirated.
Still naturally aspirated.
Still a boxer four-cylinder.
Yep.
But now it's got more oomph.
Way more oomph. It's essentially a bored-out version of the old engine.
Okay.
But that extra displacement makes a huge difference.
I bet. Does that mean more torque, too?
Oh, yeah. The new engine is much more responsive. It pulls harder. It feels more eager.
So they addressed that criticism that the first generation
Yeah.
could feel a bit underpowered at times?
They did. The second generation definitely feels a lot more lively.
They didn't just stop at the engine, did they?
No, they didn't. They also stiffened the chassis.
Oh, okay.
Improved the suspension.
Right.
Made it a lot more composed.
What about the styling? Did they update the looks?
They did, but they kept it subtle. The overall silhouette is still very similar, but they updated the front end. It's a bit more aggressive.
Oh, cool.
A bit more modern looking.
What about the interior? Any big changes there?
Yeah, they updated the interior as well. The biggest change was the addition of a digital gauge cluster.
Ooh, very nice.
And they updated the infotainment system too.
So it's got that more modern tech feel?
Right.
But did they manage to keep the price down?
They did. That's one of the most impressive things. They managed to make all these improvements without making the car significantly more expensive.
It's still an accessible sports car.
Absolutely.
Which is amazing these days.
Yeah.
You know, when cars seem to be getting more and more expensive.
You're telling me.
So they're like a reminder that you don't need to spend a fortune to have fun behind the wheel.
It's all about getting back to the basics. It's about pure driving enjoyment.
It's about that connection with the car. You know, it's funny how this project started with so much skepticism.
I know. It's a great underdog story.
It really is.
Yeah.
What do you think it was about the GT86 and the BRZ that resonated so strongly with people?
I think it was a few things. I think timing played a big role.
How so?
Well, the car world at that time was becoming very, homogenous. A lot of cars felt the same.
Yeah, kind of boring and predictable.
Exactly. And people were craving something different, something that felt special.
And the GT86 and BRZ came along at just the right time.
They did. They were like a breath of fresh air.
Like a shot of adrenaline straight into the heart of the car industry.
That's a good way to put it. And it wasn't just the timing. It was the execution.
Yeah.
Toyota and Subaru really nailed it.
They kept it simple. They kept it focused.
They understood what enthusiasts wanted.
And they didn't overcomplicate things?
Nope. No fancy hybrid systems, no crazy electronics. Just a pure, simple sports car.
You know what? I think there's a lesson there for a lot of other car companies.
I agree.
Sometimes less is more.
Absolutely. It's about understanding what truly matters to drivers.
It's about the feeling.
Yes. The feeling of connection, the joy of driving.
Exactly. And the GT86 and BRZ prove that you don't need to spend a fortune to get that.
You really don't.
I mean, they inspired a whole new generation of drivers to really rediscover that love of driving.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is. It's a legacy that's going to continue for years to come.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in all the numbers, the horsepower, the lap times, but what really matters is the feeling. It's that connection.
It is.
You get when you're behind the wheel of a car that's special.
It's about the experience, the emotion.
And the GT86 and the BRZ, they just nailed it.
I did. They reminded us that driving can be pure fun.
And in a world that's becoming increasingly complicated and stressful, That's a really important message.
It really is. We need to remember to enjoy the simple things in life.
Well said. Okay, well, we've got to take a quick break, but we'll be right back to finish our deep dive into the Toyota GT86 and the Subaru BRZ. So, the second generation, not without its critics. You were saying they felt it lost a bit of that raw edge.
Yeah, a little bit. It's like they smoothed out some of the rough edges,
Okay, so what was missing? Was it just that they had more power?
It wasn't just the power. It felt more refined, more grown up, maybe a little less playful than the original.
I see, so they lost a little bit of that scrappy charm.
Yeah, exactly. The steering felt a touch more isolated, and some people missed that raw, unfiltered feedback.
So not quite as visceral. But you said the overall response was positive. What were people liking?
Oh, there was a lot to like. That extra power was a big plus. It made the car feel a lot more eager, especially on those back roads.
So it addressed that complaint that the first gen could feel a little underpowered.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they also stiffened up the chassis, made some tweaks to the suspension. The whole car just felt more planted, more composed.
So faster, more stable, but did they keep that core driving enjoyment?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, some diehard fans might have missed that raw edge, but the second generation was still a blast to drive. They were still cars that made you want to push them, to have fun, to feel that connection with the road.
That's what it's all about, right? That pure joy of driving. Sounds like they managed to capture that even with the refinement.
They did. They didn't lose sight of what made the original so special.
It's amazing when you think about it. This project that started as this kind of underdog, this gamble, it turned into this huge success story. What do you think it was about these cars that people connected with so much?
Well, the timing was perfect, for one thing. Back then, so many cars felt the same, kind of boring, just focused on being practical.
Yeah, and people were craving something different, something exciting.
Exactly. And the GT86 and BRZ, they were like a breath of fresh air.
They were a reminder that driving could be fun, could be about passion.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the timing. Toyota and Subaru, they really understood what they were doing. They kept the cars simple, focused.
No unnecessary tech, no crazy hybrid systems.
Nope, just pure driving pleasure.
It's a lesson a lot of car makers could learn from, honestly. Sometimes less is more.
Totally agree. Focus on the essentials, the things that really matter to drivers.
The feeling, the connection, and the GT86 and BRZ proved that you don't need a six-figure price tag to get that.
They really did. They made driving enjoyment accessible to everyone.
And in doing so, they inspired a whole generation of car enthusiasts.
It's a pretty amazing legacy.
It is. It's easy to get caught up in the specs, the horsepower, the 0 to 60 times, but it all comes down to that feeling you get when you're driving a car that's truly special. And these cars, they deliver that feeling.
They reminded us that driving can be pure, simple fun.
And that's something worth celebrating. Well, a huge thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Toyota GT86 and Subaru BRZ. It's been a blast exploring the history of these modern classics.
The pleasure was all mine. It's always fun to talk about cars that are this passionate, this well-executed.
And for all you vintage car enthusiasts out there, don't forget to check out Vintage Car Chronicles every day on Spotify. We've got new episodes coming out all the time, packed with fascinating stories from the world of automobiles.
So stay tuned and keep the passion for cars alive.
Until next time, happy driving, everyone.